All right, I think we can begin. So, welcome everybody to this virtual lecture sponsored by the Max Kade Institute for German American Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We're very excited to welcome our guest presenter this evening, Professor Viktorija Bilić. I'll be talking more about her research profile in just a moment here, but to say a little bit about the bigger sponsorship of this lecture this evening and the theme that it addresses. This is actually co-sponsored both by the Max Kade Institute and specifically the Friends of the Max Kade Institute and the German Society of Pennsylvania. And for many years, we've had a great relationship with the German Society of Pennsylvania, which is located in the heart of Philadelphia. And one of the sort of instances of mutual collaboration and inspiration with one another has to do with the substance of number of our archival holdings, and specifically documents that are written in the Old German script known as Kurrent. The German Society of Pennsylvania has a number in their holdings, and we have several in our at the Max Kade Institute in our library and archive. And under the inspiration specifically of Maria Sturm, who's going to be sharing a few remarks in a moment, who's representing the German Society of Pennsylvania this evening. A few years ago, we started a transcription group modeled on a similar one that is sponsored by the German Society of Pennsylvania, whereby a number of people with expertise in reading and deciphering the old Kurrent, the old German script, get together and virtually, typically once a week, and work on the analysis, the deciphering and the analysis of these documents, and with an interest to translation and making sense of what these precious documents, which are very, very inaccessible to your average German speaker, what they actually say about the past. And so I'm going to turn the microphone virtually over to Maria Sturm right now to say a little bit on behalf of the German Society of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm a member of the library committee at the German Society of Pennsylvania and filling in right now for Bettina Hess, who's the librarian. She'll join us later, and she's actually leading this group. Oh, I see her popping up right now. So the German Society was founded in 1764 in Philadelphia to assist recent immigrants from German-speaking regions of Europe. And in 1817, the library was then established as part of the organization, and it now is still housed in a very beautiful reading room in the 1888 building that is located on Spring Garden Street in Philadelphia. And it's the largest collection of German language materials outside of academic libraries in the United States. And it, in addition to the original Volksbibliothek, it also includes the German American collection, which contains a wealth of material documenting all aspects of German American life, beginning with the first settlers in Germantown in 1683. And it's open to the public 2 days a week. German Society members, researchers can come during this time, and there are various programs and also research fellowships that are administered through the German Society, through the German Historical Institute in Washington. And Bettina, do you want to take over talking about the transcription group because you're the actual leader of it?
Sorry, I'm just walking in the door. Sure. I hope I'm not going to be repeating anything, but I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Bettina Hess. I'm the librarian at the German Society, and we're really excited that we are able to co-sponsor this event with the Max Kade Institute because we're interested in both the German American brewing history aspect as well as the transcription aspect of the talk. We have a transcription group ourselves at the German Society that we started in 2019. And we have a very dedicated group of volunteers that meets for 2 hours every week working on transcribing materials from our own archive in an effort to make those materials more accessible to researchers. They're rather challenging for people to use because of that Kurrent handwriting that is very difficult for people to read. So we have a lot of fun working in groups to transcribe everything from the original minute book of the German Society that started in 1764 to the records of a group of Philadelphians who started the Deutsche Ansiedlungsgesellschaft, which culminated in the founding of the town of Hermann, Missouri, to letter collections and everything in between. So thank you very much, Viktorija, and we're excited to be here and co-sponsoring this event.
Thank you very much, Bettina and Maria, for joining us this evening and co-sponsoring on behalf of the German Society of Pennsylvania. So Viktorija Bilić is an associate professor and the chair of the Department of Translation and Interpreting Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She's been on the faculty there since 2014. Previously, she was a lecturer for 5 years at the University of Heidelberg, which is where she received her doctorate in translation studies in 2013. Viktorija is the co-author and author of 2 books in German, Scholarly Research as Cooperative Behavior, and Historical American and German Letter Collections, Everyday Texts as the Subject of Cooperative Translation. More recently, with Professor Alison Efford of Marquette University, she edited the book Radical Relationships, the Civil War-era correspondence of Matilda Franziska Anneke, which was published in 2021 by the University of Georgia Press. Viktorija is the recipient of research awards from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and the Society for German American Studies, for which she is one of the lead organizers of this year's annual symposium, which will be held in Milwaukee, April 24th through 26th. Last but not least, Viktorija is also a member of the board of directors of the Friends of the Max Kade Institute. The topic of her presentation this evening is Translating History, the Milwaukee Pabst Family Letters, 1841 to 1887. Welcome, Viktorija.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Okay, I hope you can all see it. In case you can't, just let me know. Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Mark, and thank you, Mark and Antje and Maria and Bettina, for inviting me today to speak about my project with students translating the Pabst family letters, or I should say the best Pabst family letters that were written between 1841 and 1887. So as for the outline of my talk, I will begin by saying a few words about German Milwaukee and the German beer barons, die Bierbarone, and then I will go on to discuss my project-based museum internships in German-English translation. And this is a student collaboration between UW-Milwaukee and Pabst Mansion Museum in Milwaukee. Then I will describe how I designed the internship class and the student's historical translation internship experience. And then I will show several student letter translation examples, the German originals and the English translations from the internship course from these letters that are taken directly from the collection. And then I will come to a conclusion and provide a project outlook. So about 7 million Germans came to the United States in the years between 1820 and 1920 in 3 major waves of immigration. While they settled in both rural and urban areas in the state of Wisconsin, they were particularly concentrated in Milwaukee, which attracted German immigrants in droves. We can see that in this chart here, which illustrates the sheer numbers of Milwaukee residents born in Germany. And according to historian Walter Kamphöfner, census data for 1850 shows that Germans actually outnumbered the native-born Americans in Milwaukee in 1850, and in 1860, in the city's northwestern quadrant, 3/4 of all households were German. So this is just the percentage of Milwaukee residents born in Germany. They, of course, had children, so many, many Germans in town. and especially between 1850 and 1910, which is also roughly the period the letters were written in. So as a result, in the 19th and early 20th centuries, Germans shaped every aspect of life in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee. Known as the most German of major American cities, it also became known as German Athens, or in German, Deutsch Athen. We can see that name in early records about the city. And in these images here, they provide a glimpse of German Milwaukee. I will show a few more images. These, for example, are the women at Usinger's famous sausage in downtown Milwaukee. So in 1910, half of Milwaukeeans claimed German ancestry. There were German schools, German newspapers, German politicians and mayors, German clubs, German theaters, German restaurants, and plenty of German brewers in the city. Milwaukee, of course, is also known as Brew City because of the many German brewers that settled here. So in the 19th century, especially newcomers to Milwaukee basically did not need to learn English, as German was spoken everywhere. And this is the inside of Pabst Theater. It's now Pabst Theater. It used to be das Neue Deutsche Stadttheater, the New German City Theater. Just a couple of images before I get to speaking about the brewers. This is City Hall. Architect is Henry Koch, built in 1895, modeled after the City Hall in Hamburg. There are similarities, but many differences. One of the differences is that around the clock, there are these Bierkrugtürmchen as kind of an homage to the Brew City, the Bierstein Towers. Then also by architect Henry Koch in 1882, Turnverein Milwaukee, or better known as Turner Hall. And then we also have other buildings, for example, the Germania building, 1896, architects Schnetzky and Liebert, known as the world's largest German newspaper building, and around 1885, 50 German periodicals, newspapers were printed in the city of Milwaukee alone, and a lot of them in this building, school books, newspapers, and so on. This is the Pabst Brewery complex. There are about 30 buildings. The oldest was built in around 1872, and the architects were Hoffmann and Strack. So if you've been to Milwaukee, you can visit Pabst Brewery. It's very interesting. And this is also by Otto Strack, the Pabst Theater, 1895. So when das Neue Deutsche Stadttheater, the new German City Theater, burned down, Frederick Pabst, the brewer, rebuilt it and named it after himself. And we still have that right next to City Hall in downtown Milwaukee. I also thought I would show a couple of historical postcards talking about German Milwaukee and the German beer barons. We have a digital historical postcard collection at the UW Milwaukee libraries consisting of 12,000 postcards that have been digitized. And many of them relate to Germans in Milwaukee or the brewers. This is one of them, the Pabst Brewery, greetings from Milwaukee, die Pabstsche Brauerei, Gruß aus Milwaukee. And then I found lots, but I'm going to show two more interesting ones. One, a postcard between 1907 and 1930, my two best pals in Milwaukee, beer and a pretzel. And this one here is interesting too, postcard between 1907 and 1912, beste Gesundheit in Milwaukee, best health in Milwaukee. So who were the Milwaukee beer barons? There were four that we've called the Big Four, and those were Frederick Miller. The Miller Brewing Company was founded in 1855 by Frederick Miller from Riedlingen in Württemberg. Then Valentin Blatz from Miltenberg, Bavaria. He purchased Johann Braun's City Brewery in 1851. And following Braun's death, he married Johann Braun's widow in 1852. Then the third one is Schlitz with a similar history. Following August Krug's death, Josef Schlitz from Mainz, Hesse-Darmstadt, took over management of Krug's brewery in 1856 and also married Krug's widow in 1858. And then Pabst, Captain Frederick Pabst from Nikolausried in the province of Saxony in Prussia. He became vice president of his father-in-law's Best Brewing Company, which was originally founded in 1844, and he took over in 1864, later renaming it Pabst Brewing Company. And he was known as the captain because before he got into the brewery business, he was a captain on the Great Lakes, mainly on Lake Michigan. The Best Pabst family. So in 1844, Jacob Best from Mettenheim, Hessen-Darmstadt, created the Best & Company brewery with his 4 sons, Jacob Jr., Charles, Philip, and Lorenz as partners. Charles and Lorenz soon left and established their own brewery, the Plank Road Brewery, which was eventually purchased by Frederick Miller. As early as 1844, the Best Brewery also opened beer gardens and beer halls in the city of Milwaukee. Another interesting fact here is that Margareta, Jacob Best Sr.'s daughter, married editor-politician Moritz Schöffler in 1845, and he was the founder of the city's pioneer German-language newspaper, Wisconsin Banner, interestingly first spelled with a K. Founded in 1844, later spelled Wisconsin Banner, then Wisconsin Banner and Volksfreund. By 1850, the Wisconsin Banner was the second largest Milwaukee newspaper after the English language Milwaukee Sentinel. So the paper published numerous advertisements for the Best and later Pabst breweries. And here are 2 early examples from 1851. March 26, 1851, advertisement for a Lagerbierhalle, Lagerbier Hall, von Gebrüder Best, by the brothers Best. And then this is interesting, Ostwasserstraße is what it says here, highlighted in yellow, East Water Street. So the street names were, they used the German names. Milwaukee is spelled this way in many, with an IE, in many historical sources, and almost exclusively spelled like this in this letter collection as well. And here they are advertising selbstgebrautes Lagerbier zu den billigsten Preisen. So their homemade Lagerbier for the cheapest prices. Another example, also Wisconsin Banner, July 12, 1851, noch eine Bierhalle. Morgen eröffnen wir unsere Bierhalle auf dem Berge in der 2. Ward, oberhalb unserer Brauerei, wo selbst wir unseren Gästen ebenfalls mit dem Besten von den Besten sowie mit echtem Schweizer Käse je nach Verlangen aufwarten werden. So, in English, another beer hall. Tomorrow we will open another beer hall on the mountain in the 2nd Ward above our brewery, where we will present our guests with the best of the best, as well as Swiss cheese, depending on their wishes. So this is an early marketing play on words on best, das Beste von den Besten, the best of the best. So they were also very good at marketing, even already in 1851. Then Jacob Best Sr. retired in 1853, and by 1859, Philip was the sole proprietor and changed the name to Philip Best Brewing Company. 2 of Philip Best's daughters married German-born men who would become partners in the brewery. Frederick Best was married to Maria Best Pabst, and Emil Schandein was married to Lisette Best Schandein. Philip Best then retired in 1866, and his sons-in-law, Emil Schandein and Captain Frederick Pabst, each purchased a half interest in the company. They were both excellent businessmen. They embraced innovative marketing methods and new technologies, for example, artificial ice machines. Following Emil Schandein's death in 1888, the captain renamed the brewery. However, Pabst Brewing Company retained the B in its logo, as we can see here down to the right, to honor its founder. And at the historic brewery that I showed, the Pabst complex, there's one building that is named Best Place at the historic Pabst Brewery, also for that reason. honoring best. Pabst Brewing Company was one of the largest brewers in the US, and in many ways, the Best and Pabst families represent the quintessential German immigrant success story. So this building, of course, we also still have in town, Pabst Mansion. And the captain and his wife had 10 children, but only 5 survived to adulthood. And they moved into their new home on Milwaukee's prestigious Grand Avenue in 1892. Pabst Mansion is today a museum offering tours to the public. Here you have a glimpse inside the museum and the beautiful staircase right here and the kitchen to the right. So this is another image of Pabst Mansion. As to our project-based museum internships in German-English translation, we started in 2020, but have to go further back in history. In 2005, 20 years ago, historian John Eastberg discovered about 350 German letters written between 1841 and 1887. They were written by friends and members of the Best Pabst family in the old German Kurrent, and no one had found them before, and they were at Pabst Farms in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. They were donated to Pabst Mansion in 2018, and then 15 years after they were first discovered in 2020, that was at the beginning of the pandemic, we started the project. The letters were rediscovered, so to speak, scanned and archived by the museum, and I was contacted because translating historical letters has been my main research focus for 15 years. And then we started the project that summer. In our MA in translation at UWM, we have French, German, or Spanish to English as language pairs, and the internship is a required course for students, and it's an opportunity for them to gain professional translation experience. For the internship, they complete 100 to 120 hours of field work. And at the conclusion of the internship, they submit an internship report reflecting on their work. And in this case, of course, they also submitted transcriptions and translations. More on that later. So this internship in particular is available to my students in German-English translation. I expect that the project will span a period of about 10 years. There's work for 30 graduate student internships, and so far, 10 graduate students have completed this internship since 2020. We also got some funding, which was fantastic. We secured funding from the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development to sponsor 2-year-long paid internships for students in the German translation track. That was in 2023 and 24 to translate historical letters in the Pabst Mansion archives. So students transcribe and translate approximately 25 to 35 letter pages into English, and I divide them up by letter pages because a letter can be 1 page or it can be 12 pages, so we go by letter pages, and even there could be more content, of course, on 1 letter page. There are 9 boxes total, and the transcription and English translation of the letters contained in boxes 1, 2, 3 was completed by spring, so in these first 4 years, we got through 3 boxes. And the translated historical letters will be part of an exhibition at Pabst Mansion, where they currently have renovations. So we have planned it for next year, 2026. This is one of the letter scans. So beautiful handwriting, Kurrentschrift, as you can see. A little bit about historical letters. So there's no shortage of historical letters and documents written by German immigrants in archives in Wisconsin. There's a real demand for translation of these texts, obviously in other archives throughout the US as well. Letters sent from the US, historians Wolfgang Helbig and Walter Kamphöfner, who have published several letter editions of immigrant letters, estimate that between 1820 and 1920, approximately 280 million letters were sent to Germany by newcomers to the United States. And letters sent to the US The immigrants, of course, received response letters from family and friends in Germany. Letters were a main means of communication for immigrants who had already settled in America. So the best family members who already lived in Milwaukee and in Chicago exchanged numerous letters too that we have in this collection. Several scholars have emphasized that personal letters as text types are difficult to define since they may contain a wide variety of different contents and writing styles. I have said that decoding and researching historical letters can feel like solving a puzzle because the letter writers generally knew each other well. They did not explain their multiple abbreviations, nicknames for people, contextual backgrounds, and so on, and people and events mentioned in the letters. So this has to be researched to fully understand the context. The steps in the historical translation process are as follows. First is creating a digital archive. And in this case, the Pabst Mansion archive did that for us. The archivists helped us with that. So we were provided with a finding aid and the scanned letters. And then we began our work of transcribing the German source text. Third, researching letter protagonists and backgrounds. 4, analyzing the writing style of letter correspondence, translating the letters from German into English, and revising and editing the letter translations, which I often say this is the fun part, translation, because there's so much that precedes the actual translation into English that is sometimes difficult, especially for students new to reading Kurrentschrift, and research takes time as well, of course. This is what the finding aid looks like that we were provided with here, 9 boxes and an abstract that says it consists of papers, mainly correspondence, from the Best and Pabst families during the time when the Pabst Brewing Company was known as Best and Company, and that the letters are largely personal in nature. And that is definitely the case. So for students who take the internship with me in the summer, it's an 8-week intensive course that looks like this. If I've also taught it during spring and fall semesters, then it's more spread out over the course of 15 weeks because students are taking other classes as well. But when they are fully focusing on this internship, this is what the 8 weeks look like. There's 100 to 120 hours of field work required. I provide weekly feedback on homework for each module, for example, the transcription, before students move on to the next task. I argue that these texts are best tackled using a collaborative, student-centered, and project-based teaching approach. So week 1, learning Kurrentschrift, weeks 2 and 3, then the transcription, which I then correct. Meanwhile, the students analyze the text, think about their translation strategy, contact our internship host to ask research questions, and then they move on to translation and editing. And they submit a report and also a translator's introduction with their translation, and also receive a final evaluation by the internship host and me, of course. So this is just to illustrate how collaborative this process is. So this is the example for summer 2023, where I had 3 student interns. And so we all are co-researchers, co-editors, and include the museum curator and archivist in that too. The students discuss their research steps and their translation challenges in the course and with me. So it's truly a collaborative process during both the text analysis research and the translation phase. So examples from the internship course. First, this is what I give the students who don't know, who all of them have not seen, most of them have not worked with Kurrentschrift before. So I provide them with a chart to be able to read a letter like this. For example, here, Sheboygan, meine teure Marie, my dear Marie. And of course, it's difficult because the handwriting in the letters never looks exactly as it looks in the chart and then looks different depending on who's the letter writer and so on. But this is very helpful at first for students to learn the script. It can also be helpful to write the script themselves as they are learning it. Here are a few scans from the Pabst Best Letter Collection. So we see that this is beautiful handwriting, all Kurrentschrift, and we also see that the family was relatively wealthy because they were not concerned, or very wealthy in some cases. They were not concerned with saving space on the paper, which I've seen in other collections, that it's much more condensed writing and all over the place, and there's definitely not a line in between these individual letter lines here. So, and the reason also why the letters are so well preserved is that they were found within a black metal box at Pabst Farms in Oconomowoc, and so that's why they are in excellent condition. This is the text analysis guide I give students based on historian Stephen Stove and his article from 2002. And the questions are, who are the main characters and what is the plot, so to speak? Because these letters are taken out of context and we need to figure out who the main characters are and what is happening and what is being discussed, what are the topics. Second, how does the writer portray events, relationships, and self? How does the writer use literary convention? And how can we widen the context of letters and diaries? As for the research part, among other things, the museum archivist provides the students with family trees, genealogical information, and parallel text. And all co-researchers, including me, consult historical newspapers, genealogical databases, census records online, and so on. And we share information in the online discussion forum on the course platform. So if someone found information about someone mentioned in the letters, we share that as well. So this is also part of the collaborative process. So we got through boxes 1, 2, and 3, and what do they reveal? The letters are mostly social in nature. They reveal details of the everyday lives of the Best and Pabst families. Letter writers, there are many letter writers, more than 24. Best family members and friends in Germany and in the US, also members of the Best and Pabst families themselves when they were traveling. Philipp Best, Maria Muth Best's daughters Elisabeth, son Heinrich Best, niece Apollonia Best, nephew Karl Best, nephew John Forer, Philipp's brother Charles Best, Marie Muth's Best's friend Anna Gärtner, and others. Letter recipients are Philipp Best and his wife, Marie Muth Best, also his brother Jakob Best, their daughter Lisette Best-Schandein, also son-in-law Frederick Captain Pabst, and others. The letter topics, they range from marriage announcements to business transactions to beer brewing business and competing beer brewers to birthday greetings, homesick notes from abroad when they were traveling, Christmas and New Year's letters, condolence letters following the death of Philipp Best, new babies and additions to the family, health of family members. Nephew John Forer is writing about his time as a soldier in the Civil War, so he's writing letters from the front. Friend Anna Gärtner is writing about her life on her farm in Sheboygan, and so on. So there's a wide variety of different topics that come up in these letters. Project challenges. For the students, all students have said that the biggest challenge is reading Old German handwriting, Kurrentschrift. And that's also why I proofread all the transcriptions before they start translating, and sometimes also before they start the research phase. Who is who in the letter correspondence? Figuring out who everyone is, because many, many people are mentioned in the letters, I think more than 100. And research is important here. For example, consulting census records and information from the expert at Pabst Mansion. They provided answers about people mentioned in the letters. And this helps the students because they not only write introductions to their translations, but also insert explanatory footnotes here and there when it's necessary to explain letter backgrounds. The writing style is also a challenge. Antiquated language, some words that are no longer used, sometimes dialect words. The formal form of address, siezen versus duzen, and what to do with that in translation. And then we also have some mixing of German and English, so Denglisch. For example, words like der Stor, ich muss noch in den Stor gehen. And really this is, I still need to go to the store, spelling it, the English word in the German way. Idiosyncratic and non-standardized spellings, elliptical writing, long sentences, and a lack of punctuation is also a challenge. As for their translation strategy, I think it's important for the students to first come up with their translation strategy before they start translating. So they are asked to determine their translation strategy and then to each write a 2 to 5 page translator's introduction outlining the letter contents and how they are approaching their translation. Then in the online discussion forum, we discussed the following questions. Scopus in translation means what is the goal of your translation? Who is the target audience? Who are you translating for? And what might need to be explained for that audience. Domestication versus foreignizations are two translation strategies. Foreignization would be to highlight the foreign elements here of the translation, whereas domestication would mean to Americanize these letters, which students never choose to do. It's mostly they opt for foreignization. And we discussed translation challenges. So students choose a more foreignized translation approach, maintaining German elements, for example, Frau, sometimes the long sentences or nicknames like Lisettechen. And they also preserve the letter idiosyncrasies and consulted historical parallel texts and dictionaries to approximate the historical 19th century language in their English translations so as not to use words that are too modern. Okay, so finally, I have 7 examples to show you. This is the first one. From one of my first interns when we just started in summer of 2020, Nastasia Meyer, transcription, translation, and footnotes are by her. And here's Charles Best writing to Frederick Pabst, Chicago, September 14th, 1870. So the transcription reads, Herrn Fred Pabst, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, lieber Cousin, Ihr geschätztes Schreiben vom 12. August kam heute Morgen in meinen Besitz und habe ich das übersandte Geld nebst Bieranweisung sofort an Mr. Pauli überliefert. Ohne Veranlassung zu mehreren für heute grüßt herzlich Ihr Charles Best. Herzliche Grüße an alle. Statten Sie Tante Philipp meine besondere Hochachtung über Ihre menschenfreundliche Handlung ab. Herr Fred Pabst, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, dear cousin, your esteemed writing from the 12th of August came into my possession this morning, and I immediately passed the money that you sent along with the beer order to Mr. Pauli. Without occasion for more today, I send my greetings to your Charles Best. Warm regards to all. Be sure to give Aunt Philip my great reverence for her philanthropic deed, Charles Best. And the footnotes here explain the relationship of the letter writer to the recipient, and then the Tante Philipp mentioned in the letter, that this refers to Philip Best's wife, Marie Anna Muth Best, and that this is likely Charles Best writing, who Charles Best Jr. and Frederick Pabst was married to his cousin Maria, making the men cousins by marriage. He addresses him as cousin, which at first confused us, so we did the research into that. Second example, transcription translation footnote by Marissa Irvin, internship also in summer of 2020, Philip Best writing to his brother, Jakob Best, St. Louis, August 29th, 1859. The transcription reads, Bruder Jakob, es kommt einer der ersten Saloonkeepers von hier nach Milwaukee namens Lannenberger. Er will das Bier daselbst versuchen, weil er schon oft beschwindelt ist worden und will etliche 100,5 Barrels kaufen. Ich habe ihm unsere Adresse gegeben, der Mann ist so gut wie Gold. Gebe Acht, dass ihn der Albert Blatz nicht beschwätzt, denn Blatz kennt ihn von hier, hat ihm schon Briefe geschrieben. Blatz hat seinen Saloon hier aufgegeben. One of the first saloon keepers from here is coming to Milwaukee. He's named Lannenberger and wants to try the beer himself because he has often been deceived before and wants to buy several hundred half barrels. I have given him our address. The man is as good as gold. Just take care that he isn't being wheedled into it by Albert Blatz, since Blatz knows him from here and has written him letters already. Blatz has given up his saloon here. So there's some competition that is sometimes mentioned, even in these family letters, because they were all involved in the business, and they will mention what is Blatz doing, what is Miller doing, what is the competition in St. Louis doing. And here the student inserted an explanatory footnote about Albert Blatz, just saying he's Valentin Blatz's son. And they owned a competing company. He was an early innovator in bottling and national shipping. And then this is another challenge that comes up in historical letter translation all the time when English words are used in the text, and then what to do with that in the English translation. So this is what I have also do, and the student also chose that strategy is to italicize that word to show this English word has been used in the German as well. And here also Milwaukee is spelled this way, and she decided to keep it that way. And saloon again is italicized to show that this was used in German. The transcription translation footnote by Isolde Müller, internship in fall of 2022. This is John Four writing to his aunt, Marie Moot Best, from Danville, Kentucky, December 28th, 1862. And this is very interesting also linguistically in terms of the language. He writes, Liebe Dande, ich hoffe, dass euch mein Schreiben gesund und wohl antrifft. Wir haben die Kranke noch gefasst in die Krankewäge. Wir haben ziemlich viel zu tun gehabt. Wir haben jetzt immer noch über 200 Kranken im Hospital. Es sind jetzt 28 tot. Es war wieder ein Fight gewesen. So linguistically, this is very interesting, and I will read the translation before discussing it. Dear Aunt, I hope my letter reaches you healthy and well. We collected the wounded into the ambulance wagons. We had rather a lot to do. We still have over 200 wounded in the hospital. There are 28 dead now. There was another fight. Definitely non-standardized spelling. And then the student inserted an explanatory footnote about John Four. He was stationed there with his regiment, 22nd Wisconsin Infantry Regiment from December 12th to January 26th. And that this 22nd Regiment is formed in Racine, Wisconsin, where he enlists. And at the time of enlistment, he's 19 years old with gray eyes and black hair. He is 5'4", and profession is listed as a brewer. John Four is a second-generation immigrant, and he mingled German and English in a way that resembles the Wisconsin German dialect of his time. And this is what the student wrote in her introduction. Most striking about Four's letters is the melding of English and German by representing English words in the German sound system. So, for example, and also the fight here, spelling it in the German way. This fourth example is transcription and translation by my student Jamie Dine, internship in spring 2023. Here, Anna Gärtner, a friend, is writing to Marie Moot Best from her farm in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, May 12, 1855. The transcription reads: Ach, meine Beste, wie viel hätte ich Ihnen nicht zu erzählen, könnte dabei nicht unterlassen, Ihnen mitunter einige Vorwürfe zu machen, hinsichtlich Ihres Hausstandes halber. Warum, meine Beste und Gute, tun Sie sich nicht mit Ihrem Herrn Gemahl in Ruhe setzen? Meiner Ansicht nach haben Sie so viel, dass Sie einen ruhigen Alter entgegensehen können. Seien Sie von Herzen zufrieden mit dem, was Ihnen der liebe Gott bis hierher gesegnet hat. Und leben Sie nur für das Wohl der lieben Ihrigen. Folgen Sie meiner Rat, geben Sie Ihr Geschäft auf und setzen Sie sich in Ruhe. Sie als Hausfrau werden doch einmals fertig in Ihrer eigenen Wirtschaft. Aber Sie haben doch wenigstens keinen Ärger mit die fremden Leute, denn wie größer das Geschäft, wie mehr Last. Und dann kürzen Sie sich Ihre Lebenstage selbst ab, durch die übermäßige Anstrengung, und man lebt nur einmal in der Welt. So this sentence continues over several pages. Very long sentences are a challenge here. The translation reads, "Oh, my dearest, I would have too much to tell you, whereby I could not refrain from including a few reproaches here and there concerning your household. Why, dearest and good friend, do you and your Herr Consort not retire? From my view, you have so much that you can face a calm age. Be sincerely content with that which the dear Lord has therefore blessed you, and live only for the well-being of your dear ones. Follow my advice, give up your business, and retire. You, as housewife, will indeed be someday finished with your own household, but you have nevertheless at least no bother with other people, for the bigger the business, the greater the burden, and then you are shortening the days of your own life through the undue exertion, and you only live once." So very long sentences, which are kept here in the translation. Herr is also kept as well. And then there are some grammar issues which are not replicated in the translation. She also writes to Marie Moot Best 3 years later. This transcription translation and the footnote is by Jenny Davis, internship summer 2023. Meine liebe Marie, es ist Sonntag heute und ich halte mich im Geiste recht gemütlich mit dir. Die Briefe mitsamt der Karte trug mein gutes Männchen noch denselben Abend hinunter zu deinen lieben Brüderchen und Betty. Sie freuten sich sehr darüber. Sag Herrn Riebler, wir lassen herzlich danken und ich wünsche Ihnen recht viel Glück zu allen seinen Handlungen. Und meine liebe Marie, Herr Riebler ist mir einen Brief schuldig, dann komme ich wieder. Grüße ihn herzlich von mir. So it is Sunday today. I keep myself quite cozily in spirit with you. My good husband carried the letters together with a card, still on the same night, to your dear little brother. Tell Herr Riebler we sincerely thank him and I wish him quite good luck with all his affairs. And my dear Marie, Herr Riebler owes me a letter. Then I will come back. Greet him sincerely from me. So this footnote she inserted is very interesting that 3 years later they switched from the formal Sie to the informal Du. Again, we have very long sentences and then this explanatory footnote about Konstantin Riebler. Another transcription and translation, internship fall 2023, Neil Forrest, Dora Moot to Marie Moot Best, writing from Burlington, Wisconsin on February 2nd, 1863. And here this is a birthday greeting. Liebe Tante, heute ist dein Geburtstag folglich für mich ein großes Fest, denn wie konnte man jemand lieben und verehren, ohne dessen Geburtstag als einen Festtag zu betrachten? Möchtest du diesen Tag nur noch recht oft erleben? Das wäre meine größte Freude. Mit Inbrunst habe ich heute auch darum zu Gott gefleht und er erhört meine Gebete gewiss. Du bist mir immer ein Muster und Vorbild gewesen und ich habe mir namentlich heute recht fest vorgenommen, dir immer ähnlicher zu werden. Darum erhalte du mir auch ferner deine Liebe und Gewogenheit, deine gehorsamste Nichte Dora Moot. Dear, on today your birthday, hence a big celebration for me, because how could one love and adore someone without considering their birthday as a holiday? If you would only experience this day many more times, that would be my greatest joy. Fervently, I also prayed to God about this today, and he is certainly answering my prayers. You have always been a role model and example for me, and today I have decided to become more and more like you. Therefore, continue to keep your love and favor for me, your most obedient niece, Dora Moot. For this student, the biggest translation challenge was that he translated letters from different letter writers. So there were lots of birthday greetings and condolences after the passing of Philip Best. And so this student translated letters and never by the same letter writer, which is a challenge in terms of transcription, but also translation and research. I think I will skip over this in the interest of time. So what do the letters reveal about Milwaukee history? There are more than 24 letter writers. The Best Pabst family were well connected and well respected in 19th century Milwaukee and Wisconsin. The majority of the letters were written in German, with very few exceptions. German, including in dialect versions, was spoken by all letter writers and recipients. The letter writers had different educational backgrounds. Most letters were written to the family of Philip and Maria Best, and letters were shared and exchanged within their circle of family and friends, as is often the case for historical letters. They provide a glimpse into the Best Pabst brewery empire. However, mostly they are personal in nature. So the letters bring Best Pabst personal family history to life, but they also illustrate historical events at the time, for example, the Civil War. Conclusion and project outlook. The project was featured on our local radio station here in Milwaukee, the University Magazine, Pabst Mansion newsletter. We did an interview that aired on the local news. 2 students virtually presented on their project. 2 other students presented their work at an exhibit at UW Milwaukee. And the students have definitely had a positive experience. This is coming from some of the students' testimonials. They especially appreciated the collaborative translation environment that ensured that they were able to achieve their professional objectives. It highlighted the benefit of working with a translation partner. And another student said, one of the things I've enjoyed about this project was that it wasn't just transcribing and translation, it was a lot of genealogy and local history. So many things had to come together to correctly read the letters. It was more than a translation project, it was a historical project as well. So the Pabst Letter Translation Project is ongoing, as there is material for about 20 more internships. And the project really provides an ideal opportunity for integrating large real-life translation projects into the curriculum while building a partnership with a local museum and engaging with the local community in the city. And these are my sources. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That was fascinating. And I am happy to open the discussion and invite folks, if you haven't already done so and you have a question, to just go ahead, type it in the Q&A, and then I will read them off for Victoria. So our first question comes from Kathy DiCenzo. How can we help with the translations?
Oh, just contact me and I can send you a couple letters to transcribe and translate. So we have more than enough. And also I heard from the museum director that they found even another collection. So there's more coming. Yeah.
In Oconomowoc or in the mansion
No,
itself?
somewhere else in the mansion itself. And it's not as many letters.
Wow.
Have to look into that.
That is exciting. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
This question comes from Sean Regan, and it's, aside from discovering the letters, has John Eastberg, who you mentioned early on in your presentation, has he been part of this project?
Yes, we kept him informed. He's retired, but he still keeps in touch and comes back to the mansion to give lectures. So yes, has definitely looked at the letters with great interest. I've talked to John Eastberg, also to Gary Strothmann and Jocelyn at the mansion. I've been invited to the mansion frequently. I never miss the Christmas at the mansion, and then we also discuss the letters during those occasions.
That's great. The next question comes from Cindy Lindau. Where are the physical letters stored now?
In the Pabst Mansion archive. So there's an archive that is included at Pabst Mansion, and they have an archivist working on these letters as well.
In the building itself?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Very nice. So this comes from Atiba Pertilla at the German Historical Institute. Nice to have you join us this evening, Atiba. Greetings from another German immigrant letters project. Have you already gone through the full collection to determine what proportion are from Germany as opposed to the US?
Yes, so we have a finding aid and for the 9 boxes, and it's also sorted by letter writer of alphabetically. And so we know what percentages come from where, and I just need to check my finding aid. So sometimes I've also jumped to box 5 if someone at the mansion was very interested in one letter and we looked at that,
And
right? So
um, and all of them are now digitized. They're completely scanned, all the letters.
I think about half of them, we are
Half.
scanning them as we go, as we move through the letters, and it's taking a few years, right? So we haven't scanned all 9 boxes yet.
Good. This next comment is from Jessica Leduc. She says, "Amazing. Thank you for this presentation. Very fascinating. Vielen Dank." So it's nice. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
So the next question comes from Jeff Sheeby. How and who do you review and correct the translations to current German, then to English? So how do you review and correct the students' translations to maybe update it to
So
let's see.
the students send me their Word documents with the transcription of the letters, and then I edit them in track changes mode so they can see what the errors are, and then they accept those changes. And I have been reading Kurrentschrift letters for almost 20 years. So I read them like any other handwriting because I've been doing it for so long. And then I send them the corrections so they can see where the errors were, and then they accept those changes. And I correct them before the students move on to the next phase of researching and translating.
I see. Great. Thank you. The next question is a genealogical question here from Michael Rayberg.
Mhm.
He refers to a significant brewer in Burlington, Wisconsin, whose last
Mhm.
name was Moot,
Mhm.
M-U-T-H. Do you have any sense of how Moot is maybe related to the Best Pups family?
Yes, they're related. So Marie Moot Best belonged to the Moot family and then married Philip Best. So she was from that family. So there's a direct relation. And several of our letters also were written from Burlington.
Ah, interesting. Great. Another short question from Jeff. Are the letters digitized? And we've already addressed that. And will they be available online?
Yes, we're thinking about the exhibition also being an online exhibition. I'm looking into databases and websites and how we can present them best. But yes, hopefully they will be. This takes additional time though, too.
Here's another sort of accessibility question that comes from Wesley Brown. Are there archives of the German language newspapers and magazines published in Wisconsin?
Archives where German language newspapers are published in Wisconsin. Yes,
I,
there was.
or are there? Yes, yeah, I guess I was interpreting it as like digital archives, but um, yeah, I guess this would be maybe physical archives, where
Actually both. So the Wisconsin Historical Society has large collections and they're also digitized. The Library of Congress has digitized papers. Um, so I mostly search for newspapers online, but sometimes if I can't find a digitized version, then I look on microfilm in one of the libraries or archives here. That has happened too. Um, but yes, we look into both these
yeah.
options.
Here's a kind of technical question that's interesting. Is there any software available that attempts to translate German to English in letters, like with the Kurrentschrift?
I guess there is, but I never use it. I really don't need it. And Transcribus is there for transcription. I don't use it. And also it's difficult because we have so many different letter writers, right? We have maybe 40 letter writers and 350 letters. So if you want to train a software to adapt to that particular style, it would take a very long time. Also, I want my students to learn how to read the script. And so that is also a major goal. And I myself, I'm still faster reading it than using any type of software. So no.
Sure. I'm going to piggyback on that question. I recently received a query from a gentleman who knows some German. He has a knows enough German to be able to make sense of his historical postage collection. So it's things like receipts for packages and various things that have to do with historical postage, written in German and Polish, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And he shared with me, um, not something that was transcribed with transcribus, but with something that he just simply called AI.
Mm-hmm.
And the translation was, sort of hit or miss, more miss than hit.
Right. Yeah.
How, I mean, everybody talks about AI, and this is something that I'm not as nearly familiar with as a lot of other people are. But are there openly accessible tools with just straight up AI other than Transkribus that one can feed scans of Kurrent letters into?
I suppose they are. I haven't looked into them. I also think it's people talk about AI in translation and don't think about the fact that whatever you put into any kind of platform, you feed into AI. So there's also a confidentiality issue there.
Mhm.
So I'm currently, my other project is a Holocaust letter translation project. And there I really had the students sign a form not to use any kind of AI because these are highly personal and difficult contents, and they shouldn't be out there for software to analyze, right? So this
Yeah.
is something that people never think about. There might be tools, but for personal letters, I think they are not very good because the handwriting is so different per letter writer,
Mhm.
right? And then also looking at what I showed in my translation examples too, it's not just translating it into English, it's also making sense of it in English in a
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
with like inserting footnotes, and for John 4, she looked into the census records and, the Civil War documents to be able to write that footnote. And I just don't see AI doing that. It's just not working.
It just
Right.
takes a holistically thinking human being
Exactly. Exactly.
to
And then
make
I
sense
don't,
of all that.
right. And for that, I really don't see the value of AI.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Here's another interesting question that comes from Megan Baker.
Hmm.
She says that she majored in German at UW Oshkosh.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I lost a lot of that knowledge over the years, but want to get back into language practice and dip into translations when it comes to genealogical documents.
Hmm.
Where can she start with Kurrentschrift if she's going to learn it herself?
If she's going to learn it herself, I would really recommend to start with the Kurrentschrift chart I showed, where you have, what it's supposed to look in, what in modern handwriting a letter would look like and what it looked like in Kurrentschrift. There are also several sites online where you can practice it, where they have like practice letters and then give you the answer for it. So I think that's where I would start.
Great. Here's a little historical question. The
Mhm.
question is basically, um, why is the Kurrentschrift no longer taught or used? Can you maybe say a little bit about its disappearance or the transition from away from Kurrentschrift in the recent, last 200 years?
Okay, so Kurrentschrift was used from the 16th century to about 1911. Die deutsche Schrift, Kurrentschrift, and then Sütterlin was used, which is a simplified form of the Kurrentschrift, and then it wasn't used anymore when the Nazis basically forbade it
Can you say
in
maybe
1941.
for people that that comes as a surprise, I think, to people who
Mm.
would have assumed that it would be something that sort of nationalist-minded Germans, Nazis potentially would kind of celebrate. But I think it's sort of ironic that it sort of went the other. Can you say maybe a little bit about why there was that sort of ideological switch away from a sort of distinctive German handwriting,
Hmm.
Nazi era?
I'm
Or we could speculate.
I don't know how to speculate about that. I'd rather I
Okay.
don't have the exact answer. Would have to look into it. They were against it and came up with a more standardized form of writing
Hmm. Hmm.
instead. And so Sütterlin and Kurrentschrift is not something that most Germans still today could read.
Hmm.
I also had to learn it.
How did what was your first exposure to it with historical letters or other kinds of documents or when you sort of got into it, presumably when you were still in Germany? Um, what was your first exposure to it?
My first exposure to more historical writing was really researching my own family history,
Oh,
because I have as I'm both German and Croatian. My dad is German, my mom is German, and in my German family history, we have an immigration history in the early 20th century. And I looked into that and looked at old handwriting and looked at old letters, and that I think was what got me into the field. And then for my PhD, I chose to write about translating historical immigrant letters. So
fascinating.
that's pretty much my own family history got me into the topic.
You had the good fortune that your family still preserved some of these documents then.
Some, yeah, not all, unfortunately, though, yes. But there was some postcards. We have lots and lots of photos. I have arranged family reunions
Mm,
in the Black Forest and also in New York. And I'm still in touch and kind of like keeping the family tree. And
fantastic.
yeah.
So there were some that migrated then to North America, to the United States.
Yes.
Great. Very cool. Wonderful. So here's a question coming from Dennis Cruz. How do you coach students on translating into modern English versus 19th century English?
Um, I per like students can make their decision, and the students really have never decided to translate it into modern English. We talk about translation theory, translation approaches, translation studies, and they all opted for what I presented as foreignization, keeping the foreign element and kind of like having the German elements shine through. And then also when they did translate, they looked into etymological dictionaries and so to kind of like approximate that historical English writing style. Um, that's how we coach them is also by reading texts that are from that era in English, what we call parallel text research.
Hmm.
Um, so that's, I think, most important in that context.
So
But
really,
I
and
don't say this is how you translate. I give them the tools to make their own decision and decide on their own translation strategy.
oh, interesting. What a great experience for these students. Josie Garza Medina asks, are there any plans to publish some of the letters in print form?
We might, but for now, it's pretty much the exhibit that's planned and publishing them in maybe online in a database. Because it would be a lot. I don't know that a publisher would say, yes, we will publish 800 pages of these letters.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah,
see. Maybe a selection.
yeah, yeah,
That could be a good thing. Yes.
yeah. Great. Another question from Jeff. Do you have a complete family tree for the Popster best families before you, or did you have one before you started the project to kind of help figure out who was who?
Yes. And we had that from we were given that from the archivist in the mansion. They have that available, thankfully. Um, yes. Which really helps because in the beginning you don't know who is who.
I can imagine, yeah. And maybe some overlap with some of the names, I would think too,
Yes, and
potentially.
lots of Maria.
Yeah.
And then they're called sometimes called Marie, Maria, and so on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
which one is it,
So are there, there's a question from Wesley Brown. He asked about diaries or personal journals, but basically, um, in the, in reference to the American Civil War, you did make reference to the fact that the Civil War is addressed in some of the letters. Could you
Mhm.
maybe comment on that a little bit and some of the things that you've discovered so far?
So when it is addressed, it is mostly from the nephew who is writing from the Civil War. This is where it is most directly addressed, like that example that I showed. It also comes through in some of the other letters written from the farm, where it's mentioned too that other people they know are at war or their children are fighting as soldiers in the Civil War. But it's
Interesting.
most directly addressed in those letters written by the soldier.
Interesting. Very interesting. So Barbara Glassel, or Barbara Glassel, mentions they said this is so wonderful, especially since there's so many letters still other in other Wisconsin counties. And she's
Mhm.
asking, what is the best way to find out about transcribing and translating them, and maybe even, I guess, identifying them?
The letters that are out there,
Yeah,
finding them.
yeah. I mean, are they, I guess probably a good question would be, Are these things that are primarily in private collections? Would historical societies perhaps be a good source for
Yes.
these?
So the Milwaukee County Historical Society has lots of letter collections, and you can go to their archives and see the list of letters that they have, for example, by Peter Engelmann, who was a 48er and an educator here in Milwaukee, founder of the German English Academy. The letters that are in the archives are often by the more famous German Americans, right? When these collections were then donated, I'm also often contacted by people who said, we found this in the attic. And these aren't, so it's both. You will find lots of letters in personal collections, but also in archives.
We have time for maybe one more question here from
Okay.
Carolina Meyer concerning upcoming transcription/translation internships.
Mhm.
Do you provide a database with the already collected information about, say, people and
Very,
relationships, English, historical events, and if so, in which format?
Yeah, very good question. I didn't think to include that, but that's important to know. Yes, so it's mostly I have a Canvas site, which is the course learning platform that we use at UW Milwaukee, and all the students have access to everything. So all the previous letter translations and transcriptions, all the research materials that we gather, I also gather them on a shared OneDrive folder, so everyone has access to that. It used to not be so much work for students to inform themselves and read the letters in the beginning because we had only translated maybe 10 or 20. Now that we've gotten through 3 boxes, it's a lot. I don't require them to read absolutely everything because but very often they do because this is the most important parallel text for them, the letters that are already there.
Yep.
On the other hand, the letters are so all over the place with 44 letter writers, right, that they might get something completely different. And especially with the one student at the end that I presented, his challenge was that he had lots of letters from different writers. Then you have to get used to the transcription, to the handwriting, and also the writing style for translation again. Yes, but all the students get access to that on a shared folder on OneDrive and also Canvas on our shared platform. And they've also talked to one another, like even the ones who have finished their degree and they are now working as freelance translators. I often kind of like establish communication between them. There have also been students who were friends with students who were previous interns, and then this project was recommended to them, for example.
Wow,
That
word
too
of mouth.
has happened too.
Great. Well, we got some wonderful positive feedback for folks saying it's a fascinating presentation. Vielen herzlichen Dank für einen ganz tollen Vortrag. There's one question here. Will the Q&A be available to us afterward? Yes, is part of the recording. So we've been recording this evening, and thanks to Antje Petty. And within, probably a couple of weeks, it should be made accessible and posted to our YouTube channel for the Max Kade Institute. But you'll as a person registered for this presentation this evening, you'll receive notification about that when it becomes available. But our discussion will be part of that too. So, Viktorija, thank you so much for
Thank you
joining us
very
this
much,
evening.
everyone, for the positive feedback and the good questions.
This is great, wonderful. And thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Hope to see you again at future Max Kade Institute virtual lecture events. Thank you so much.